Okay. Now we Later Persuasive Speech Project. Early this year, the Kurdish region of Iraq declared that PUBG and Fortnite, two popular video games, are banned under Islamic rules. However, many people wonder how come a religious clergy decided to interfere in a video game, and how come they decided to forbid it. So first of all, to know about it, you first have to think of video games to begin with. The first video game was created in 1958 by physicist William Higginbotham. The video game was a simple table tennis game, a dot going from one side to the other side of the screen. But this created an innovation. This was the first ever game dedicated in a computer console. So what did that mean? Afterwards, many companies decided to create video games and dedicate their money and resources on creating video games and enhancing it. The popular Nintendo arcade game Donkey Kong was created in 1981 and introduced a character that till this day remains one of the most famous and most bought games in history, Super Mario Bros. So Super Mario was created as a rival to Donkey Kong. However, as time progressed, they created its own franchise, known as the Super Mario franchise. Right now, New Super Mario Bros. Has sold over 14 million copies worldwide, making it one of the most sold games in history. As time progressed, video games decided to progress as well, in terms of not just the art, but also the gameplay, the history behind it, and also the music. In 2013, gaming company Square Enix released the game Final Fantasy VII. In the game, the soundtrack to One Winged Angel became one of the most heard soundtracks of all time because of its orchestra and chorus, making it the first game to ever have a choir. Now, to many people, they say that video games affect the brain negatively. However, I don't believe so. Neither does Mr. Kevin Adderton, a contributor on Forbes, who created a research with the University of California. So this research, they got three groups of people. The first group of people were playing 2D games. The second group were playing a 3D game. The third group were playing no game. So the 2D game was Angry Birds. The 3D game was Super Mario 3D, and the third group were playing any games. The research objective was to see how the brain affects the memory. So to many people and many parents as well, they believe that games make memory loss. Games have the student study more difficult. However, that's not the case. When it came to the 3D games, they had the highest memory. The second came 2D games, and the third came no game. In another instance, people wanted to research what does the brain do chemically to the brain, and what does games do chemically to the brain. So as it turns out, when you're playing a video game, it releases a specific chemical in the brain, known as dopamine, which is responsible to learning. However, many people were wondering, why does this happen? So first you have to look at, for example, The Legend of Zelda. The game itself is based on puzzles. To finish the game, you have to solve plenty of puzzles. In the new game, Breath of the Wild, you cannot progress without solving the puzzles in each shrine or in each temple. Now, what about shooting games? What about Call of Duty, Battlefield? How does that affect the brain? So according to the psychologist Dr. Art Markman, he created research where people were playing action games such as Call of Duty and like that. And he concluded that action video games increase the hand-eye coordination. The reason being is that video games, or action video games specifically, need you to be fast, need you to be quick. You have to be quick response because anything can change at any moment. The second part where many parents' issues is the manners, how it affects the manners negatively, and the psychology aspect of it, or the psychological aspect. Now, though there are some psychological problems that can arise from gaming, like addiction, but that is not the case. For example, even though the popular video game Fortnite created an addiction where actual parents, according to the New York Times, had to take their children to rehab because of it, the Professor Christopher Ferguson decided to do a test on video games and morality. And he concluded that being immoral had nothing to do with video games. On the contrary, that video games can actually make one even more moral. According to Mr. Daniel Weber, an author of the book 10 Reasons Why 10 Things We Benefit from Video Games, he stated that, and I quote, "A feeling of existential dread that we've not experienced anything like, except perhaps after reading Albert Camus' Lettre de while eating bad seafood. The causes of death is detailed in the game Soma." In another example, Dr. Daniel Grippolis, another author and also doctor, stated that games can show us how to grieve, what the value of life is, and how to prepare for our death, of the death of our friends, and when killing is a mercy. Now, another aspect is philosophy. Can games actually teach philosophy? One quote from a game is that one man goes into waters of baptism, a different man comes out, born again. But who is the man who lies submerged? Perhaps the swimmer is both the sinner and the saint, until he is revealed onto the eyes of man. So if you're hearing this quote for the first time, you'll think that it's probably from Bashar al-Natta, the famous Christian philosopher, or from Karl Marx. However, this is from a game called BioShock. According to the book, 10 Things Video Games Teach Us About Life, Philosophy, and Everything, philosophy plays a heavy role in video games. And not only do the philosophical backgrounds of video games help you progress throughout the video games, it even teaches the player himself some philosophical meanings. Now, the fourth aspect is that games are not appropriate for children, and they make them lazy. That goes either way. So, for example, if you're playing on PlayStation 4, yes, you can be lazy most of the time. However, if you're playing on the Wii, you have to be active. In 2006, when the Wii was first released, the concept of it was new. You had to move, you had to play, you had to do anything but sit. You cannot sit. If you sit, you lose, which was a new thing. Other companies took it, like Xbox creating the Xbox Kinect, or like PlayStation creating the PlayStation Move. Now, many people think that shooting games can result in the child becoming a mass shooter in the future. But that's not the case, because according to many researchers, including one done by Harvard, people who are involved in mass shootings actually tend to not like games. They are less involved in gaming because they see it as tribal, they see it childish. Now, how can parents regulate their children? So, one example from Psychology Today, they said that you can have 5 steps. No more than 40 minutes per day on a weekday, 1 hour per day on a weekend. Time does not roll over. No games with violence or shooting or anything like that. And no games until all work is done, like homework, chores, and all that. I would add that you should use gaming as a reward system. If you do your homework, if you do your chores, if you get an A on your exam, then 10 minutes extra. We should use it as a reward system. So in conclusion, video games have no link to psychological disorders, social disorders, or mental disorders. On the contrary, it affects the brain by enhancing memory and cognitive powers. It also dedicates the story based on a philosophical principle. Though the advantages may be overwhelming and more than disadvantages, a lot of everything could be bad. That's why we go back, could be bad to the person. That's why we go back to the Kurdish people. How come the clergy banned it? Well, the clergy banned it because it was distracting the user from their daily routines. Anything that distracts the users from their daily routines is forbidden under the name of Islam. Video games have played a huge role in society. Hundreds of millions of people worldwide still play today. It's a multi-million-dollar industry. The actions of a couple of people cannot permanently determine the future of gaming. Thank you.